Many years ago, a customer handed me some apples and, without meaning to, changed how I thought about learning. I was 21 years old, working a register at a grocery store, and I rang her apples up as Fuji. Turns out they were Braeburn apples. She let me know this loudly. And the thing is, nobody had ever taught me how to tell one kind of apple from another. I knew one produce code for one apple, and I was being a bit lazy. But after that day, I started paying attention, and I figured it out on my own. Not because anyone made me, I just didn't want to get it wrong again. And I wouldn't have called that learning back then, and I absolutely wouldn't have called it self-directed learning. But that's exactly what it was. Over 20 years later, a Braeburn apple ended up on the cover of my first book. And that book is what today's episode is all about. Welcome to Mission 501, the podcast exploring the psychology of work with a nonprofit twist. We dive into topics like motivation, leadership, team dynamics, and more, all through the lens of purpose-driven work, because doing good work should feel good too. Let's get started. So, today's episode is a little different from usual. Normally, I'm here breaking down an idea, or occasionally talking with a guest about the work of leading mission-driven organizations. But today, I want to talk about something I actually made, a book called Learning Unleashed: How Self-Direction Empowers Mission-Driven People and Teams. Now, I'm not going to give the whole thing away. That would kind of defeat the whole point of writing it, right? But I do want to tell you what it's about, and honestly, more than that, why I wrote it. Because the why is really where all of this comes from. So here's the core of it. In this world, we spend a lot of time talking about money, funding, grants, whether there's enough to go around, and that's real, and that pressure isn't made up. But the most valuable thing a mission-driven organization actually has isn't funding, it's people. And more specifically, people who know how to grow, how to keep growing, and people who are good at helping others grow. Learning Unleashed is about what makes that kind of growth possible. And the main argument is pretty simple. Self-directed learning isn't just a personality type. It's not, oh, he's a self-starter and she's not. And it's not a training program you can just roll out on a Tuesday and check off a list. It's more like a mode that people get into when conditions are just right, when the learning actually connects to the work that's being done every day, when people feel safe enough to try something, get it wrong, and figure out what went wrong, and when being curious is treated as a good thing instead of a liability. When those conditions are there, people grow and people become self-directed. And when they're not, people stall out. They stop asking questions, they keep their heads down, and a lot of them eventually leave. And here's the part that always got to me. Almost nobody looked at that problem and called it a learning problem. And that brings me to why I wrote Learning Unleashed. I've spent most of my career, and it's been over 2 decades now, in supported employment and consulting with mission-driven organizations. And across all those years, in a lot of genuinely good organizations, and I mean that, these are organizations with leaders who cared, supervisors who were trying hard, I just kept seeing the same thing. These really capable, committed people would just show up and they'd be excited to do the work. And then slowly but surely, I would just watch the energy drain out of them. And then they would be gone. And the cycle would start all over again. I saw it in the turnover. And I don't mean turnover as some number on a report or a statistic. I mean watching someone come in, go through orientation, complete their mandated training, start building relationships, and then 6 months, maybe a year later, they were gone. And there were reasons. The pay, stress, too much on their plate, maybe something unrelated here and there. But underneath all of it, there was something more basic. Nobody had actually developed them. They'd just been run through the system, handed a caseload, and off they went. And at some point, the gap between what they'd been given and what the job really demanded got too big. And passion alone, as much as mission-driven organizations hope it can, that passion can't close the gap. And so they left. And here's what makes this tricky to talk about. Nobody is being a villain in this situation. All of the stuff that piles up, like the documentation, the trainings, the audits, service definitions, billing parameters, they all exist for a real reason. When you're serving vulnerable people with public money, accountability, it's part of the equation. It matters. And I'm not against any of that. But I watched what happens when compliance becomes the primary thing behind training and development. And compliance becomes the thing that runs how you develop your staff. And the passion doesn't disappear, it just becomes redirected and kind of stifled. Instead of fueling people's learning and their willingness to try something new, it gets spent keeping people afloat in a system that was never really built to grow them. It was just built to maintain compliance. And for a long time, I couldn't explain any of this. I knew something was off. It just took going back and doing research, like going through my doctoral program, my consulting with other organizations. That's what it took before I could see the whole shape of it and really put it into words. And that's what the book is. It's my best shot at making that gap visible so we can do something about it. Not to point fingers, just to try to change something. And I want to be straightforward about this because it shapes how the whole book feels. I didn't come to this as an academic first. I came to it as somebody who actually failed out of college in the past, twice. And once was for academic suspension, and there was a lot of times where I genuinely never thought I'd earn a college degree. The grocery store, the Fuji and Braeburn Apple issue, that's where I first learned that learning could belong to me. And it took someone else to point me towards the career I've had ever since. A supervisor at that grocery store noticed how naturally I worked with the employees with disabilities who came in to bag groceries. And basically I was told, there are people who help folks find jobs, and you'd be good at that. It had not crossed my mind once that helping people learn to work could actually be the work. And so the first part of the book is memoir. It's my story, the whole mess of it. Dropping out, failing, eventually figuring it out for myself, that purpose had to come before any of the knowledge did. Because none of these ideas started as theory for me. They started as stuff that happened to me long before I had really any words to describe it. So from there, the book shifts from story into a framework. It builds on a model from an educator named Gerald Grow, and it's called the Staged Self-Directed Learning Model. And I've adapted it for what mission-driven and nonprofit work is actually like. I won't get into the weeds here, but the basic idea is that people move through different stages of readiness as they learn, and the people guiding them, supervisors, trainers, organizational leaders, they have to change what they're doing at each stage. The support that helps somebody on day one is not the right support when the employee is a year in. Getting that match right is a big part of what this book is about. And then it gets honest about what breaks learning in mission-driven organizations. What happens when the organizations don't look at where people actually are? And then it turns to what leaders and organizations can do to build those conditions on purpose and protect them when pressure gets high. One thing I'll admit that I'm a little bit proud of, I had a rule in my head while I was writing this book. And I said to myself, a book about self-directed learning should let you read it in a self-directed way. So it's set up so you can jump in wherever your job and wherever your questions might actually be. You don't have to read it front to back to get something out of it. Now, the whole book does have stuff front to back that you can get stuff out of, but it's designed so you can move into a specific chapter, then hop back, and read it in whatever order you want, and still pull the same knowledge that applies to you. So, read it however you'd like, although I'll be a little hurt if you skip the part with the apples. So, who's this book for? If you're doing the frontline work and you're wondering why your own growth kind of stalled out, if you're a supervisor or a trainer trying to develop people and feel like you've run out of room to do it, if you lead a mission-driven organization and you feel that gap between what you're aiming for and what's actually happening, this book is just for you. And here's the thing I want to leave you with. That gap between what's aimed for and what happens, it's not some fact of nature. There are conditions that create it, and conditions can be rebuilt. It's not easy, but it's absolutely possible. So, that's the book. It's called Learning Unleashed: How Self-Direction Empowers Mission-Driven People and Teams. And you can learn more at mission501.co/books. And that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.